Well, guys, welcome back. We move now in our process of figuring out how to hire people into chapter 4, which, as you see, is going to be a multi-video chapter. This is part A of 3. You'll have part B, 4B and 4C coming along. And the first part of chapter 4 that we really want to spend some time talking about is the concept of a job analysis. Job, obviously, is that role that we ask an employee to fill, the things that he or she will do on a regular basis. And analysis is the process of looking in at and studying something for the purpose of making long-term decisions or drawing conclusions. So job analysis simply is the process of looking at the things that are involved in a job so that we can make decisions about how we want to go ahead, go about staffing that job and assigning responsibilities to that job and so forth. So let's take a look at this particular chapter and talk about this piece of this chapter and talk about the process of doing a job analysis, which is, again, the process of studying a job to be able to make decisions about that job. First thing let's look at is that we have to approach filling our jobs and hiring people from one of two perspectives, and that goes to what we're looking for when we hire people. We can either utilize our jobs to we can either hire people or utilize our people to fill jobs, which is really looking at a specific function within the organization. If we are hiring to fill jobs, we're looking for somebody who can perform this particular job description, that can sit at this particular desk and do these 6 things, and we don't really look for them to do anything else. We're looking at the short-term position from a narrow perspective and trying to find somebody who has very specific skills to do very specific tasks to accomplish one specific objective. So we can hire people to fill jobs. And that's the way that we do a lot of times, especially if we're not strategic in our processes. If we are very haphazard in our processes, we look for somebody who can fill this job without much thought to other jobs that they could be doing or jobs that they could be growing into over time. So a lot of times we do hire to fill jobs, but the wise way to do our hiring processes and procedures is to look at the roles that people might need to fill, not just the specific job and the title that they need to have, but those roles that they could fill in a broader sense. If we hire people to fill roles, we're not looking at specific skills, but we're looking at capabilities or behaviors or things that they're capable of, functions, competencies that may not just specifically relate to this job, but can be used to cross borders into other jobs, into other departments, so that we have the ability to fill any need that comes up. Think about it from the perspective of our hiring. If we hire for jobs, yeah, we've got the accountant that we needed. But when it comes the time that we need a director of marketing, we got to go through the process all over again because we've hired for very specific skills to fill this particular job. If we hire for roles, yeah, we still need to have some of those skills for those tasks, but if we've got the capability of doing a variety of things, we can kind of slide people into any number of roles. From the sports analogy, on a baseball team, you've got some people that are great third basemen. They've got all of the skills to play third base, but they couldn't play the outfield if they had to. You've got other people on a baseball team that we refer to as utility players, and they are people that could play shortstop or catcher or left field or first base, and they may not be the all-star at any of those things, but on any given day, if we needed somebody to play second base, they're here. And so they are hired not to fill a particular job, but to fill a role, because they have got behaviors or competencies that can cross the boundaries and allow them to do pretty well at just about anything that we need. That needs to be what we look for. Certainly we've got to fill the job of accountant, but we need to be able to hire people that have a greater potential than just this one job. If we hire you to do a specific job and you don't have the behaviors or competencies that let you take on other roles, sooner or later you're going to get tired with this job and you're going to go find some other thing somewhere else. But if we hire people that have capabilities of a number of different things, we can kind of let you grow. And we can help you fill in the pieces that you don't do very well so that you're able to grow. If we fill from the perspective of roles, we're looking bigger picture, and that's the strategic aspect of this whole thing. We're thinking broadly, we're thinking about growth, not only for us, but for our people. But regardless of whether we fill for jobs or fill for roles, there are certain competencies that people have to be able to fill not only a job, but also a role. And people have to be motivated to do any of that kind of stuff. So think about, as we're hiring, whether we're trying to fill a particular job without much thought for the bigger picture, or whether we're trying to fill certainly for the job, but with a bigger possibility in mind further down the road. If we're thinking about competencies, how do we know what competencies are necessary? Competencies are any things that make us good at something or are capable of something. We can determine what competencies are for a particular job by looking at the job and what does that job do regularly and with some degree of expertise. Different jobs require different competencies. Some jobs require the competency of communication and others don't. Some jobs require the competency of detail, mathematical, analytical types of processes. Other jobs don't. Some jobs require the competency of interacting with the public and other jobs don't. How do we know which competencies we're looking for at a given point for a particular person? Well, it depends on the role. So in order to figure out what competencies are necessary, we got to think about what the tasks are that this job has to do. And then when we have this list of things that this job does, we think about what skills and what abilities and what knowledge and things like that a person would have to be able to do those tasks. So that's the process of doing a job analysis. We're going to dig into that a little bit further. Again, a job analysis is the systematic process of identifying and describing the tasks of a job and what the characteristics are that you need to do those tasks well. You can't really figure out what person we need unless you figure out what it is that person's going to be doing. So we look at the tasks and then we figure out what do you need to bring to the table to do those tasks. We ought to do this regularly for all jobs. We ought to regularly, once a year, once every couple of years, be looking at a job and saying, has it changed? Has it added anything or deleted anything since the last time that we really analyzed this thing? Has the requirements of somebody to do this job been altered based upon how this job has grown? So we ought to do this regularly. We've got to do it one time for every job, but we ought to go back and revise it, or at least look at it, analyze it, consider it on a regular basis to make sure that we're staying current with what we want this job to do. But in the event that we don't have the ability right now to do all jobs, we've at least, at a very bare minimum, got to look at those jobs that are significant to our business success. You know, if we're looking at a hospital, the role of a nurse is critical. If we don't have good nurses that know what to do, and we don't hire people that can do those things, our hospital is not going to survive. Certainly we need accountants. Certainly we need the patient advocates. Certainly we need the admissions. But we could stumble our way through that if we had to, as long as we can give good quality care. So figuring out what is it about our business that is really, really critical, success or failure, and starting with those roles to make sure that we understand the jobs appropriately. When we identify these tasks and these competencies, then we can figure out what do you absolutely have to be able to do this job successfully. If you've got to be able to give people shots and start IVs and communicate well on what's going on, reassure people that things are going to get better when they're depressed or whatever. What does it need? What does a candidate need to be able to do those things? They need to be outgoing. They need to be bubbly. They need to be positive. They need to be, these skills and whatnot. Overall, what we're trying to accomplish, the outcome of doing this job analysis process, is to figure out what that critical piece is, or those critical pieces are, that we need to be looking for to be able to hire the right person. And that's something that I really want you to remember. In fact, that's a question on the first test. What is the outcome of a well-done job analysis? Very simply, the ability consistently, regularly to hire the right person. There's a quote on page 129. It's in the bottom paragraph if you're looking at that page. And it says this: unless the way that a position contributes to the execution of a business strategy is understood. In other words, if we don't really have a good idea of how this job fits into what we're trying to accomplish in our company, if we know that our company it exists to sell these things or to provide this service, and we understand what the strategy is to accomplish that thing, if we can't figure out how this job contributes to that, then it's going to be impossible to consistently hire the people who will do it in a way that's accomplishing that goal. So as we do these job analyses, as we look at our jobs and figure out what they do and how we find the right people to do these things, it's got to be within the context of what is our business in existence to do, and how does this particular job help us to accomplish that? So we work from the top down. What is it that we are here? Why do we exist? What are we trying to accomplish? All right, with that thing that we're trying to accomplish, here's a whole lot of different jobs. This job helps us to accomplish that by doing this thing. That job helps us to accomplish that goal by doing this thing. Why does this job exist? How does it contribute to what we're ultimately trying to do in the big picture as an organization? So we look at the jobs we already have. We've got a job that's been a job title for a long time. Let's look at what that job does, how it contributes to our success, and what we need to do, or what we need to find in people to do that job. But not only our existing jobs, but when we create a new job, and occasionally we do create a new job, we find that somebody has too much to do, and we split some of the responsibilities of that job into a brand new job, or we pull a little bit from different places and we create a new job. When that new job is created, we've got to do an analysis of what we want that job to accomplish and what we want from a candidate for that job to be able to do those things well. So the existing jobs, the new jobs, but along with those existing jobs, how they're changing, how they're developing over the course of time. And as a job changes, as we add a new responsibility or take away a current responsibility, we need to step back and we need to say, is this going to be the way it is for a long time, or is this just a temporary thing? You know, right now, we're not going to expect you to do this thing in your job description, but we will get back to a point where you do. So it's just a temporary thing that we're removing it, or we're asking you to take on this new responsibility for a little while, but not permanently. In that case, we don't need to do any major restructuring of the job description and do a new job analysis. But if we think that we're probably going to remove that particular job function permanently, we need to get it out of the job description and get it into the right job description. So the job analysis process has to happen regularly, at least once every couple of years for each job title, to make sure that we're not asking somebody to do things that are not in their job description, and we don't have things in their job description that we're not expecting them to do. Page 130, here's a quote. The first paragraph, it's under the heading of the legal and practical reason. The job analysis helps to create an accurate list of the essential functions of a job and the required and the desirable qualifications that employees who do that job should have. So there's two critical pieces here that form the foundation of what we're doing in this class this semester. As we think about a job description, the first critical part of it is, what does this job do? What are the essential things that a person has to do to be successful in this job? And the essential functions are both those things that we do every single day, even if they don't have a whole lot of consequence or value. Every day we get the mail. Every day we answer the phone. Every day we produce this report. Every day we call our customer. Every day we sweep the floor, whatever it is. But if we don't do it, it doesn't get done. So it's essential. But it's also those things that we may not do but once a month, but they're really important when they do. The accountant doesn't produce those end of month reports anytime other than, obviously the end of the month. So it's not something that happens every single day. It only happens once a month. But if it doesn't happen at the end of the month, there's a big, big problem. So the essential functions are the things that we do in this job that matter, that we have to do because nobody else is expected to do it. So with those task list items, those essential functions, what kinds of background and knowledge and experience and skills and capabilities and things do you have to be able to do those things? Which of those things are absolutely non-negotiable required, and which of those skills and knowledge and experiences and so forth are nice but not critical? We can make you successful even if you don't have those things. The quote goes on though, and it says that because an applicant must meet the stated job related requirements, crafting a job description based on objective standards is a critical step for avoiding and defending future failure to hire and wrongful discharge lawsuits. So in other words, what that's saying is when we understand the functions of a job and the things that you have to be able to do those functions of the job, if we go about the process of designing that document well, creating that job description well, and doing it in a way that it is very objective. It's not biased in any way. It's just a really, really accurate and truthful synopsis or reporting of the things that job does. It's very objective, bystander. I watched this job. It became very obvious to me that these are the 5 things that you do in that job. These are the 10 things that you do in that job. Having that accurate, objective, makes it much more likely that we hire people appropriately, that we utilize their time appropriately, and therefore there doesn't exist the possibility later for somebody to come and sue us because we weren't fair in the process, we didn't hire the right person because of biases or whatever. So we don't have failure to hire lawsuits and wrongful discharge lawsuits. We know what this job requires. We know what it takes to be successful. We hired somebody that has the things that it takes to be successful. When they were in this job for a while and it was obvious that they didn't have the things that it takes to be successful, we got rid of this person. We don't have in either case the opportunity for somebody to say, you didn't hire me because of this, or you fired me because of that. We can go back to the job description. We can say, no, here's the essential functions that you have to do on a regular basis. Here's the things, the skills that you need to be successful in that. We don't have a good match here between what you bring to the job and what is required of the job. It's very, very objective. It's not written from the bias of you're female or you're Asian or whatever. Very simply, here's the things that you have to do. Can you do those things? Can you not do those things? In order to do those things, here's the skills that you need. Can you do those things? You've got to have a college education. Do you have one? And it becomes very, very black and white. So the legal issues become much less critical to us because there's nothing wrong with our processes. When we do the job analysis, a couple things to keep in mind. The job analysis has got to be valid. It's got to accurately reflect what this job does and what you need to bring to the process to be successful. And it needs to be very specific. One of the problems we have with job descriptions is that some of our descriptions are very, very vague, and they need to be really specific. And some of our requirements are very, very vague. 6 years of experience in a job-related field. That's kind of vague. The more specific we can make it, the better. We've got to be able to identify the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are critically tied to this job and success in this job. And we've got to be able to differentiate levels of performance. In other words, having more of a quantity of this skill causes you to be more successful than somebody who has a lesser quantity of this skill. So the more you have of this particular thing, the better we can predict that you're going to be successful over somebody that doesn't have a large measurable quantity of these things. Job analysis, also number 2, needs to be in writing and it needs to be relevant. If it does us no good to go through this process of a job analysis if we don't write it down and we don't put it in a filing cabinet somewhere that we can pull back out later. So as we do this process, we make our notes, we create this document, we store it somewhere for future reference. And it's got to be relevant. And you can see in the bullets underneath that point number 2, we got to be able to pull it back later. If we've got somebody in a job that's not doing something they're supposed to do, we need to be able to pull this job analysis, this job description out later and say, look, this is what we're expecting. It's always been this way. We didn't make this up yesterday. This is the way that it was, the expectations were laid out 3 years ago when you were hired. bring it out later to instruct people on what they're supposed to be doing, to clarify for people what they're supposed to be doing or not doing. You're spending all your time doing this. That's not part of this job. Don't spend your time working on this when that's not what you're being paid to do according to this description in this document. But secondly, to accurately represent the functions. It can be very frustrating to sign up for a job, to get in and then suddenly find out that this is not what I thought it was. So it needs to accurately reflect what you're going to be doing every day. I can apply for a great sounding title, but when I read the functions of the job, I go, I don't really think I can do that stuff. The little paragraph that you put summarized the job sounded perfect for me, but when I look at the bullets of what I have to do every day, I can't do this one. I don't have a confidence level with that one. I don't have the background for that one. So it represents the functions of the job better. And then third, the job analysis has got to be developed from several sources. We talk about that in a different lecture, but we can go and we can observe people doing the job. We can talk to people who do the job. We can talk to managers who do the job. We can have questionnaires. Or different kinds of things, but it doesn't help us if we just get one perspective. If we go to the person who does the job and say, what do you do all day? It may not be an accurate reflection of what they should be doing all day. It may be that they just do the things that they like doing and not the things that they don't like doing. But those things that they don't like doing may be a critical part of this. So looking at it from different perspectives, you didn't tell me about this, but your manager did. And I can see from your manager perspective that this is important. So we're going to include that. Nobody sees the entire picture. Even you doing the job don't always understand why you're doing the job, why this part of the job is part of your job description, not somebody else's. But the manager sees the bigger picture of things. The vice president sees the bigger picture of things. The customers see a different perspective than you do. So it's important that we develop job descriptions from the perspective that they're valid, that they're specific. We make sure that they're in writing, they're relevant to what the job is, and that we've gotten a lot of good input as we have tried to put this thing together. The last part of this lecture deals with what you typically find in a job description. The job description is the outcome of that job analysis process. And as we think about what this job does, as we observe and we research and we analyze what this job does, we begin to get a picture of, if we were to describe it to somebody, this is what we would use to tell them what this job does. So the job description comes out of that job analysis, and the job description is very basically a written accounting of the duties of the job and the responsibilities associated with it. And a good job description, the job descriptions that we're going to produce in this class aren't necessarily like the job descriptions you're going to see in your organizations. And that doesn't mean that your organizations are necessarily bad or incomplete or anything like that. I just want you to understand what could be in a really good job description, so you kind of have an idea if you're ever in a position to redo your job descriptions of things that you might want to include to help a lot of different people understand what that job is. So let's talk about the components of the job description. Typically, they will include things that talk about the size of the organization, the type of the organization. Maybe it's just a couple of words, the title of the company, the department name, the job title, who it reports to. They may include the salary range. You may find that the salary range is not on this description, because that's something that you want to have the flexibility of negotiating when you offer somebody. And if it tells the salary range on the job description, you might lose a little bit of your advantage as you try to negotiate. So it might have the salary range, it might not. Position grade or position level, especially if you're in military or those kinds of things that have pay grades, you might say that it's a PD3 or an SJ7 or whatever. But without having a frame of reference as to what that means, it may not be that valuable. Reporting relationship may not have specifics about who you report to, but it might say that this reports to the director of marketing or that kind of thing, or at least it's within the accounting family of jobs. Typically, there's also, it's not on this slide, but the job description typically has a paragraph summary where you have the main ideas of what this job does. Then you have the essential functions we talked about on a previous slide. Those are the main duties and the responsibilities, and also the occasional duties and responsibilities. Again, there are certain things you do every single day. Those are the main duties. But there are other things that are important that you only do once in a while. The job description also talks about the context of the work environment, the equipment that you use, the people you interact with, anything unusual about the job, travel or weekend work or holiday work or things like that. The purpose of contact with other people, the frequency of contact with other people, and there's almost always, and there should be if there's not, a statement at the end of the essential functions that says something to the effect of other duties as assigned. And for this class, we're going to have even more specific statement that we put on our job description that also deals with not prohibited by law or unethical or things like that, because other duties as assigned could be so broad that we ask people to do things that are not ethical or whatever. Why do we do this thing? Because it helps to communicate to people. There is an immense value to an organization, to people, of doing a job description properly. From the previous slide, you're going to want to remember that other duties as assigned as a very, very important part of most job descriptions. We can't possibly think about everything that you could have asked to do for this particular job. There are going to be times when we say, I need you to do this for me, and you go, it's not in my job description. So we typically put in this overall cover statement, other things that we ask you to do. That's important. This is important because it tells the candidate what's expected. It tells the incumbent, the job holder, what's expected. But from a test perspective, I want you to remember the value from three different viewpoints. A good job description is valuable to the company because it helps us to analyze the candidates to figure out which one's going to be successful the quickest. We know what this job involves. We know what this person needs to have to do this job successfully. So we can look at our candidates and say, which candidate has the best combination of these things? That candidate should be able to step in here and do this job faster. So that job description helps us to get to the candidate, to identify the candidate that can be successful the quickest. It also helps us to know when a candidate really is not a good fit whatsoever. So from this pool of 20 applicants, we can scan through and we can immediately sense that these 15 probably are not going to fit, and we can put them aside and no longer let them use up our time in this process. So there's a lot of value to the company. There's also value to the candidate, the person who wants the job but who does not yet work for us in this role. It helps that candidate say, what does this job require? What is it going to be doing all the time? Can I do those things? And am I qualified to do those things? And based upon that understanding of what this job does and whether I want to do those things and whether I'm capable or qualified to do those things, it helps the candidate to answer the question, is it worth my time to inquire? Is it worth my time to apply? If I can't do those things, there's no point in applying because they're not going to hire me. If I'm not qualified, doesn't make any sense to apply. But if I can do those things and I am qualified, yes, probably worth my time to inquire. And then thirdly, there's value to the person who holds the job now, the person who has that title, who's on our payroll, who's doing that job, because it helps that person to understand, what is it that you expect me to do? Here's the job description. Here's the essential functions. These are the things that it is legitimate for you to ask me to do on a regular basis. It helps me also to know what skills or what knowledge do I need. In order to do this third thing on the job description, the essential functions, I need to be able to do this, or I need to have a background of that. If I don't have that background, then point number 3 there, what training do I need? So it helps me to do my job better once I get in that role. There's the overview of the first part of Chapter 4. One of the things we're going to do in this class coming up here real soon is to develop a job description. So I want you to be thinking about the extensive process that goes into analyzing a job to figure out what those functions are, what those knowledge, skills, and abilities are that make you successful. Unfortunately, in a summer term, and this video might be used in a non-summer term, so I got to be careful with my wording here, but especially in a summer term, there's not a whole lot of time to go through this process of creating a job description. You don't have 3 weeks to think about it and play with it and whatnot. You got to put something together real quickly. So understanding the background and the context makes it a whole lot easier to do this stuff. Hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea in the framework of a job analysis and the basic content of a job description. especially in terms of the essential functions. The next video, part 4B, is going to talk about the second or the last major part of that job description, which focuses on the candidate and what they need to be successful. So I hope you're looking forward to that. It'll be it's going to be lecture video 4B, and it's coming up shortly. Bye for now.